Tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee. David Tulis.
What's going to take for people like you, my listener, to be fed up with the idea of state intervention in any area at all? I think we are in a long-term trend. That trend, the mega trend, the geopolitical trend, is toward decentralization and the breaking up of large systems that are, well, many of them are just wicked. Okay, they're just wicked, and they are costly. They don't fulfill anything of their pretended stated mission. And they are paid for by compulsion. They're paid for by taxation. And so whether you've got FEMA or whether you have foster care systems in the various states, you have effectively a machine for abuse. At every point where the state has control of a marketplace and prevents the marketplace from forming, you have an abuse. You have a top-down system that is unaccountable. There's a story in the Oregonian about the state paying $7 million after preschoolers were starved by their foster parents. The agency, the welfare agencies agreeing to pay that amount of money filed on behalf of 2 children who were nearly starved to death by foster parents that state government approved, right? The settlement is among the largest in the state for wrongdoing by an agency, but it's short of the record of $15 million that was awarded against the Department of Human Services in 2015 on behalf of 9 infants and toddlers that were abused by a foster father. So whether we're talking about the foster care system, which is a machine for kidnapping children, right? The foster care system is the machinery with nice faces of the families that take these children. It is a machine for kidnapping children to maintain itself, right? There's no charitable interest left. It is all just process and procedure by which we maintain our control. We maintain fear among families, and we maintain our people, right? All of our people in the foster system, all the administrators, all the test takers, all the snoops, all the number counters, the bean counters, all these people are here. We're supporting them, right? We are a jobs agency for this class of people who are involved in the pretended care of children who are taken from evil parents and put into our loving embraces. Well, that's one example. The FEMA example, I think, is something we need to consider as well. We have Texas now going to become the victim of the FEMA organization, which maybe you saw yesterday our Facebook feed here at Nooga Radio, and I do want you, our listener, to go to Facebook, go to Nooga Radio, and like our station, and note what we put up there in the way of referred news. Okay, we have a lot of things that we just put up, sometimes without comment, like a humorous meme we'll post without a comment, but sometimes we'll make a note about some state abuse or other. We didn't have FEMA until 1979. Before that, how did the American people respond to hurricanes, emergencies, floods, fires? How did we do it? We don't think back that far, but we didn't have the Federal Emergency Management Agency, then created by President Carter in an executive order. How did we rebuild before? Well, we did it. But Ron Paul says that FEMA has well-documented inefficiencies, and they are the inevitable result of centralizing control over something that is extraordinarily complex, and that's disaster relief. Disaster relief can't be organized by one party. It just can't. It's like trying to organize education in Hamilton County schools with its 43,000 student inmates. You can't create something that serves a pretended diverse interest in one system. It just cannot work. You have all kinds of abuses in the system. We could call these academic or pedagogical abuses rather than, I would say, child sexual or starvation abuses in the foster care system in Oregon. We're talking about a different kind of abuse in a public school system, but you have it still. And that would be in the direction of depersonalizing the student and putting the student in the data mining system that public schools have become. Data mining and manipulation of people with their with their individual instruction plans that certain people have to be given certain treatments, right? Certain behavioral mechanisms and instructions and personal variances, right? It's a mass system, but they can deliver results individually through individual plans. But when you have a storm such as the one that struck Hurricane Harvey, struck Texas, relief cannot be organized by one party. It just simply can't. And people, Ron Paul was the man who said no. He voted no even for federal relief in his district, and he got fired for it. But other people in his district, hearing that he voted no, said to him, we had FEMA come in, and we're on the dole now. We're waiting for this. We're waiting for that. We're having to show this and show that, and follow its rules. And we would have been better off without it. And that I think will be what many people say, because the government, when it takes over something, can throw you off, right? You could be coming there with a truckload of water bottles, and hygiene products and diapers, hamburgers, you name it. You can be coming into Texas with that, and you'll be told by the officer, as on our Facebook page. There's a story, the video of the officer saying, "Go back, we don't want you here." There's a vehicle that crosses some water, and there's a cop, kind of a fat officer standing there, and he's, get down. And so the man says, "Why?" And so the cop just orders him down. Again, very peremptorily, very with an air of propriety, right? He is the proprietor, and he owns the man in his swimming vehicle, very high vehicle, by the way. Some very large tires, no doubt. They're not in view, but he's very high off the ground. So he comes down, and the officer says, "We don't want you here. You just need to go away. Don't come here. We don't need you." Okay, that's what the cop says. So you have this problem of being there without government permission. Well, that means that you're going to be subject to arrest. Maybe your goods confiscated. How can that be? It really has to be that way. When you have a government agency involved, you have to have threat and coercion and compulsion. The whole thing is based on coercion and compulsion. And whenever there's grace, it is always the exception. I would say it's the exception. It goes against the grain of that operation because it is funded by coercion. It uses statute. It has authority in law that are written. And with that authority, there is also the power to compel. At every point, there seems to be a power of a FEMA man to compel. You can't bring relief in here, sir. I'm sorry, we don't need you in your flat bottom boat here. We've got enough. We're fine. Just going back. We appreciate that, but just going back to where you came from, we're fine here. Texas is a great state. Texans are strong. We don't need you to get lost, effectively, is what the cop was saying. And that's a problem with FEMA from the beginning. It's not only counterproductive disaster assistance program, Ron Paul says, and this is the thing that I want to mention specifically. The National Flood Insurance Program creates an incentive to build where flooding is likely, and that's what's happened in Texas. There were flood areas that people said, "I will ignore the flood area because I can buy insurance, right? Because I can buy insurance, I will build here and hope for the best." They're misled. The market signal of government subsidized insurance, that is a misleading indicator for someone who's about to build. And that person will build in a flood-prone area if he can get insurance, right? A private insurer is not going to do it because a private insurer has the limits on the premiums that come to him, right? If you're the federal government, you don't have to worry about details like that. And that's what's happening wherever you have a national flood insurance program, such as the one that is run now, and whose charge account is going to be being hit now by thousands and thousands of claims of people who got flood insurance. Many, of course, did not. They could not get it privately. And here's some who got it through the government will be getting it. And what happened is that that agency, the National Flood Insurance Program, with nearly $25 billion in debt, right? Even before Harvey claims have come in, is $25 billion in the hole. Another federal agency like FDIC that is in the hole, and it cannot fulfill its promise. These are the guarantors, right? These are guaranteeing agencies that are in the hole. How can you be a guaranteeing agency if you're not liquid? Well, only in the federal system is that possible? And so what we face here, not just in Texas, but around the country, we face a system that is leveraged to the hilt. The entire system is leveraged. There is no liquidity in that system, right? We're talking about the American financial system and the national government. There is no liquidity. It's all paid for by debt. It's all paid for by borrowing. And the debt limit is, of course, there's a fight about the debt limit. There's muffled coverage about it, and it has to be raised because there's not income. There's just not enough income to pay for all the commitments and obligations. And here now, we have a system, $25 billion in Hawk is going to be receiving more claims to pay, more demands on payment, and we're and somehow we're supposed to say this is the way things are supposed to run. Right? You run your household like this. These are the federal government operates as it would a criminal enterprise. It is in many ways like a criminal enterprise, but I won't go too far in that direction because there are noted patriots around here who say that soldiers, the veterans who died, whose deaths are remembered on sacrosanct holidays like Memorial Day. They died to protect our freedoms, right? And you don't want to say things like, well, the national government is a crime syndicate. I think that may be going too far for a lot of people, but it operates as if it were one. But it has a kind of religious protection. It has a kind of aura around it of piety, of holiness, and of service, right? Of noble sentiment. These are all things evoked when we have the M14 rifles that the Chattanooga Police Department has for ceremonial occasions, right? You see things like that. All the muzzles aimed in the air. The officers all dressed in their parade uniforms, and you just can't help but think, oh, this is the highest and the noblest part of America. These officers, the noble dead, and so on. Well, all those high things where your Adam's apple bobs in your moment of emotion, those are all the fruits of mistake, I would say. The fruits of mistake. And the national government, in almost every agency, I think there are probably very few exceptions. It is run like a criminal enterprise. And that's the free market analysis of it. It's all in Hawk. No one is liquid. And when you have an ostensible good thing, they're like a flood program, a flood insurance program. You create a false signal, and you encourage people to build in these Texas lowland areas where they should not have built. They should not have built, but they got insurance from the good people in Washington. Ron Paul says that Congress should phase out the federal flood insurance program and forbid any issuance of new policies. It should reduce federal spending on disaster assistance. And this is probably a good point, and that is that all costs for disaster recovery should be for people who are liable to file tax returns, that all costs for recovery be 100% tax deductible. Those who suffer the worst, he says, should be completely exempted from all federal tax liability for at least 2 years, if of course they had any to begin with. Tax-free savings accounts could also help individuals save money to help them bear the cost of a natural disaster. So in other words, you could have a tax-free account where you put money on the side that's pre-tax, another chit to taxpayers, and that money could be set aside like a medical savings account. Money is set aside pre-tax that is used only for the protected purpose in the MSA's setting. That would be for medical expenses, or a natural disaster account where you save up money pre-tax for use in rebuilding after a certified national or natural or national disaster such as Hurricane Harvey. People need to have the relief of the government getting out of the way. The government, the national power, cannot be in the way. It is in the way at every point. It does not know how to get out of the way. And there's so many people who are involved in it. There's so many people in the Republican Party, in the Democrat Party, who expect it to do something. And my thinking is, that we believe in local solutions. And if we are Nooga-centric, then we think that there are problems in Chattanooga that are not solved by a Justice Department report, right? That would be police abuse. We can solve these problems by having active people such as Franklin McCauley turning their attention to abuses and neglect. And we have a case from Hanson Melvin, a civil case against the city of Chattanooga for police abuse. And there are some things there that are allowed to fester, right? Wrongs, ways that are allowed to go along. And we have a non-vigilant district attorney, Neil Pinkston, who is not prosecuting crimes by state actors. We need to be convinced of that. Neil Pinkston does not care about state crimes. He will let state crimes go. And his office will prosecute on the basis of perjury cases against such people as Hanson Melvin and Rochelle Gelpin. Rochelle Gelpin, by the way, missed her chance. She sat on her rights, having moved in the past few months to Birmingham, sat on her rights to file a suit against the police department, against the individual officer who abused her and falsely arrested her and perjured himself, lying about her to the grand jury. And there are some things that we think might be in the right direction. Well, what about privatization? Now that's on the front page of the paper this morning. And it's hard to tell in every case whether or not it would be good or bad. Privatization, does that mean that the government is getting out of that particular sector? Or does it simply mean that the government is using its largesse to pay for, in a contract, to pay for a service, such as, for example, that offered by Volunteer Behavior Health, which is a story by Emmett Gienap, the Times Free Press court reporter, today on the front page. And he's telling us about a chunk of $50 million fund given by the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services to this organization that is trying to help people who have behavioral problems, right? Mental problems, psychological problems, and to help them in a way that would save resources that are being spent very generously in the criminal justice system, as he calls it. There's a quote here from Matt Yancey, assistant commissioner in the department. He says, if you talk to any jail administrator across the country, they'll say between 15 and 25% of the people in their jail consist of people with mental illnesses. This program will alleviate jail overcrowding, and this man tells the Times Free Press, as a result, it will help reduce costs related to prosecution and incarceration. This, I'm not sure in this case what the right thing is, but the general answer is to be this: that the state withdraws from areas in which it has no competence, and that it not continue seeking to expand the areas in which it has a responsibility, especially if it's using police and jails to bring about the good thing, right? Prosecutions ostensibly bring about justice. Well, many prosecutions, I would say probably most prosecutions, are not about justice at all. They're about social management. They are about commercial enforcement, both of which are of keen interest to the modern state. Tennessee not accepted from that assertion. Candy Templeton is another person quoted by Emmett Gienap in his story today. She says, jail is not a good place for people with mental illnesses to be. No, this is Matt Yancey still. He says, this way we can connect them with supportive housing opportunities and with employment opportunities. We can prevent them from interacting with the criminal justice system. Candy Templeton is the senior vice president of Volunteer Behavioral Health, and that is the goal of that organization. She said it's unknown exactly what expenses the grant will cover, but there will be more operation on Spring Street, where this group, Volunteer Behavioral Health, operates. If law enforcement picks up somebody and their main issue is a behavioral health issue and not a criminal offense, then they can bring them to us, she says. The whole practical side of this is to be able to decrease the number, should be to reduce or decrease the number of individuals who need treatment more than incarceration. There's a quote in here also from Gino Bennett, the director of support services for Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. He says, Basically, I believe we can reduce our county jail and Silverdale inmate population numbers if we begin to think differently about the way we use these facilities. Now, here again, I think we're seeing a local economy solution. Again, this is quoting Emmett Gienap's story in the Times Free Press today. Make sure you read that. There are jurisdictions all over the country who have committed to finding ways to safely reduce jail incarceration by keeping people out of jail who don't really belong there. And there is no reason that we cannot do the same. But this will call for creating alternatives that truly can make our communities healthier, fairer, and safe. That's quoting Sheriff Jim Hammond's noted assistant. The sheriff's office wants to divert the mentally ill and substance abuse offenders from coming into the jail and getting the ones in jail released by redirecting them. This is a good trend. This is a good trend, though it doesn't seem to answer my question about privatization or retraction. I'd say retraction.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader, Nooga Radio.